What's up, everybody? I'm Matt.
And I'm Beth.
And today we're going to be reviewing the interior in the 2022 Hyundai Ioniq 5. So the Ioniq 5 is the first vehicle from Hyundai and Kia on this brand new electric car platform that they're making here. And so, I mean, it's really very radically different than a lot of other Hyundais, and also just even compared to other electric cars in a lot of ways. On the outside, you know, it's very bold with its styling, doesn't look like really anything else on the road. And it also is bigger than you might be expecting because, you know, when you look at this thing in pictures and videos, it might just look like it's like a normal hatchback size, but it's actually a good bit bigger. And this is very close in size to like the Mustang Mach-E, Volkswagen ID4 and stuff like that. And on the inside, it's also radically different because of this electric car platform. The way that they've chosen to design their vehicles here, at least for the Ioniq, is that you have basically no lower dashboard. It's wide open and you have flat floors both for the front and the back. And it's just a very different design from anything, honestly, that's in modern times. I mean, this reminds me of stuff from like the 40s and the 50s, honestly, which is really cool.
Yeah, and it's definitely so much more roomy, and if you feel like you have so much more space, and I think you do.
Yeah, there's more space just to spread out. And Hyundai actually wants to fully capitalize on this whole spaciousness idea because this actually has a wheelbase, by the way, that's longer than the Hyundai Palisade, which is their huge 3-row SUV. And so that gives you more cabin space overall. But one of the ways that they're like utilizing this extra space is you actually have this little fold-out ottoman that flips up here, and this seat actually reclines all the way back so that it lays down onto the back seat there. So you can actually like have a full-blown like lounge set up here if you want to hang out while this vehicle's recharging, which, by the way, it does much faster than basically all of its competitors. So you won't need to be relaxing in here too long. It'll actually be able to do a 10% to 80% charge in just 18 minutes if you can find the fastest chargers out there. So, I mean, but still, just very cool that you have that kind of feature here. And moving on to the seats here, that's the first thing. They're pretty soft, comfortable seats. I will say, though, that they are not as soft as the Mach-E seats. They're also not as soft as like a Tesla Model Y. Those seats are like marshmallowy soft in both of those cars. This is a little bit firmer, so if you don't like a super soft seat, you know, you might like the extra support you might get with the Ioniq seats here. Another nice feature of the Ioniq seats is that they are cooled as well as heated. And for some reason, cooled seats is like this elusive feature that no electric car offers for some reason. This has that, which is so nice that it does. And you know, a good amount of support here to the seats. My only other little complaint with the seats here is that to get to the heated seat controls and the cooled seat controls, you actually have to hit this button and then go into the infotainment system and then hit it. So it's a multi-step process versus something like a Mach-E where you have your seat controls and your heated steering wheel controls right on the screen all the time, and it's one tap. This is 2 taps. First world problems, but especially if you have the radio up or nav, to have to move away from that screen and pull this screen up to adjust your heated seat controls, you know, it's just not ideal. I know they want to keep this very minimal here with these buttons on the dash, but I feel like having 2 more wouldn't have killed them either. So one minor little nitpick there, but otherwise I really like these seats.
Yeah, they're really great because with the passenger you get all the same power seats. They're great.
Good. Yeah, so it's nice that they do give you all that same adjustment and stuff, because a lot of car companies, you'd be surprised, do not do that. So anyway, moving on to the steering wheel here. It's a very interesting wheel. It's totally different than most other Hyundai stuff, and there's just 2 spokes, and there's not even a badge on it. It just has 4 dots. I'm not sure what 4 dots even mean, because I don't really see that in any of the Ioniq branding, but this, I think they're going for the Ioniq thing being a whole sub-brand eventually from Hyundai, so that's why there's no Hyundai badge here. But regardless, just a few buttons here on it. You have this cool little drive mode button as well, which is an interesting touch. But it's a great 9-3 grip, nice little 10-2 notches here. Unfortunately, it is a heated steering wheel, which is nice, but that is also buried here in the infotainment screen instead of, you know, just having a quick little button. But still really great. And one thing that I love is you have paddles here. So these paddles on the back of the wheel actually change the regeneration, so you can have it, you know, do more regen braking or less depending on how you're playing with these paddles. And it's really fun when you're going down hills and stuff to kind of you know, crank that up. It'll slow the car down with those, and then you can, you know, go on the upshift paddle there to allow it to, you know, coast a little bit more. And so just really nice that it has that, because most other electric cars don't. But I love that in like the Kia Niro EV a couple years back, that had these as well. But like the Mach-E, the Volkswagen ID4, Teslas, none of them have that. And if you're someone who likes being involved in your driving experience a little bit more and you're an enthusiast, these are really fun to play with, and I love having those paddles. Another thing in this area that's kind of interesting is you have these very chunky stalks here for your turn signals and your wipers, and even this gear shifter, which is kind of reminds me like a Mercedes gear shifter, where it's mounted to the steering column here. But they're all very large and very chunky, and this combined with like the door handles actually kind of reminds me of like some very early 2000s cars, like the very chunky stuff you saw in like the Beetle, the PT Cruiser. That's not a knock. I know that, you know, those vehicles might not seem very cool anymore, but it kind of has these fun little touches to it that I personally really like. You know, you have like the cool ambient lighting as well here, which is another, you know, pretty cool touch at night. But I think they just tried to add a little more character into this interior, so it's not just kind of plain and boring. And so I think it's really cool the way they did that.
Yeah, and it's also really different. I mean, every car company has the same thing here and there. They have the same way to open the door. They have the same way to do everything, really. And so this really differentiates itself from other cars.
Yeah, and a couple other things that are a little bit different than a lot of other cars, even some competitors, is just some of the materials you have here. Like you have this, like, it almost looks like a marble type finish down here. It's this interesting little thing. You have some cloth. There's, of course, some like faux leather and stuff. But one thing, like with the leather, you can get it, I mean, you have it in black, you can get it in like a lighter gray. There's also like a dark green leather too, though, which is kind of cool. That's something that like nobody else offers. But Hyundai and even like Genesis, we praised this in the GV70 interior review, they offer all these fun colors. Moving on to the gauges here, you'll see that it's kind of Mercedes in its style, where you have just two big screens. They're about 12.25 inches each, and they're nice, large, very high resolution. And if you're familiar with any other Hyundai and Kia vehicle, it's very similar, like with the gauges, for example, with what information you have there in the middle. It's just your basic trip info and, you know, all the driver safety stuff, and that's about it. Thankfully, though, here, with this being an EV, you have these very cool little bar charts, kind of, where, you know, it'll actually go up based on your speed, and the other one will go up based on how much power you're using out of the battery, kind of like a TAC, you know, since you don't have an engine here. But it's just very cool the way you have that. And you can also change the looks of that depending on the drive mode that you're in, so it'll go to a more aggressive thing for the sport and, you know, milder for the eco. And so just a very cool touch. And also, it's worth noting, if you don't love that this is bright white, you can also switch it to black, or you can have it based on the time of day, so it'll, you know, be brighter in the day and go to the white, and then black at night. But I think they did a pretty good job here on the gauges, although I still would like to see a little more customization. But then the infotainment screen is the same basic stuff you get with any other Hyundai or Kia, basically, aside from the fact that on the home screen you also have the little battery charge to go along with the nav, and the, you know, nice little images they have here. The weather is a nice little touch and stuff. But then all, you know, your radio tuning and all that kind of stuff is all the same as it is in any other, you know, Hyundai Kia product. You also have the sounds of nature, which is the fun ambient sounds this has, and also you'll see like an EV screen, which is nice that it does have that, and that'll give you basically like the nearest charging station if you're looking for that. You can also set in and schedule all kinds of different things. It'll also be able to break down like how much energy you're using for the climate control, how much energy is going to actually moving the car, and it'll break down that kind of stuff for you as well. So it all works, you know, nice and easy. My one big gripe, though, with the infotainment system, it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is not wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. Both the Volkswagen ID4 and the Mustang Mach-E have wireless smartphone integration. And if you're on a long road trip, you're probably going to want to charge your phone by plugging it in anyway. But for the short trips around town, having that wireless integration is really nice. You just leave your phone in your pocket and, you know, have access to text messages and stuff like that nice and easily there. And the fact that this doesn't have that really kind of sets it back in an infotainment realm to me, just compared to the others that just have that. This is a brand new car, brand new platform. Why it doesn't have that, I have no clue. And so it also is made worse by the fact that you have 3 USB jacks up front here in this car, but the one that you need to actually plug in for the CarPlay is this one, way down buried in the floor here. And the actual bin to hold your phone for this USB jack is actually as low as the floor. So you have to like leave your phone on the floor, and that is not an easy reach.
Especially if you're driving. And the worst thing about it too is that if you wanted to have your phone close to you, you'd have to put it in the cup holders, which is fine. I've done that in my car, but you need a way longer jack just to get here. than a normal jack that they would give you if you get your phone.
Oh, like a cable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's messy and cluttered, too, because then you have this wire going across here, and that kind of, just clutters everything up. And it's also hilarious because they do have a wireless charging pad here. So they're like, this is where you should put your phone, but not whenever you want to have smartphone integration. For that, you need to take it out of this area and then put it all the way down here. It's just one of those things. I don't know how that got past the product planners that were like, yes, that is a good place to have the only USB jack. I also don't know why all these USB jacks can't just hook up to that. Why they're only for charging kind of seems, again, like a weird cost-cutting thing. So that's really the biggest problem I have, honestly, I think, with this interior. But otherwise, just nice little buttons here. I do love that you have a volume knob still and a little tune rocker and physical buttons, because this is something a lot of the other electric cars are going to capacitive touch, or like in the Mach-E, the entire thing is a screen. There's not a single button on it aside from a big volume knob. But I like having physical buttons for that stuff, but then, you do have some capacitive touch stuff down here, but it does work very well. Otherwise, in that area, you also see 2 cup holders and this huge bin, which is really great, and then also this center armrest up here, which is padded a little bit. I wish it was a little softer, but not bad. And you'll see a pretty shallow but still a nice extra little space in there. And one cool party trick with this whole console actually is that you can lift up on this lever here and the whole thing slides back. So basically all it's going to do is limit any leg room for anyone who's sitting in that middle seat there, but I guess it makes it a little bit easier to access those USB jacks in the back if you want to access those, or if you want this to be extra open, I guess. But yeah, just it's cool, but I don't really see the purpose of that, honestly.
Yeah, and I would say one thing too about storage. I wish there was a little bit more space that was covered up. They only give you this little tiny space, and if you have valuables and whatever things that you would want to hide away if you're away from your car for a little bit, I just wish that there was a little bit more space for that.
That's a good point, because yeah, like this lower bin, the Mach-E has something very similar to this, but there's a cover and it will cover most of that up. So that is yeah, a key differentiator, that the Mach-E does have more covered storage there. You also will have pockets in the doors here with a bottle holder, and so it's nice that you have those. So yeah, also one last thing to mention is that in this limited trim you also do have a Bose 8-speaker stereo. It sounded really nice, and a good amount of speakers, although the Mach-E does have a 10-speaker B&O system, so if you're looking for the most speakers in your electric vehicle, the Mach-E is going to be a little bit of a better sound, probably just from speaker count, but this Bose system sounded very good as well. One other little advantage that this does have over the Mach-E and the Tesla, for example, is that you have this nice big glass roof here, only on the limited trims, by the way, but it does have a cover. And yeah, having a cover, is really nice, especially if you live in a hot place where you don't want to have the sun beaming down on you. I mean, the glass roofs in the Mach-E and the Tesla are very heavily tinted, so it's not a huge issue, and there are aftermarket covers and stuff, but having this cover just right here ready to go is really nice to have, and another feature you might appreciate again over some of the competitors. But moving on to that back seat space here in the Ioniq, it is a really nice and spacious back seat. So this is an area where they actually have a little bit more space than some of the competitors. So technically, by the numbers, there's 1.3 inches more rear legroom than in a Mach-E, and it's almost 2 inches more rear legroom than a Volkswagen ID4. Now, in practice, it seemed like to me this was basically the same amount of legroom as what we got in the Mach-E whenever we had that for a week. And the ID4 was pretty close as well, although I think this is definitely a little more roomy than the ID4. But anyway, it's a nice, comfortable back seat. Those seats do recline, by the way, so that you can maximize the cargo space a little bit more if you'd like. There's also rear window shades, which is another thing that none of those competitors offer. Another very nice kid-friendly feature. So as far as kids go, with having the shade here and the window shades on the side, a little more kid-friendly in this than some of the other competing vehicles. There's also a fold-down center armrest there with 2 cup holders built into it. When you look forward, they got 2 USB jacks, another little cubby, and there's also extra little cubbies there in the doors back there as well. Now, as far as the cargo space here in the Ioniq, the normal hatch area there is pretty good. It's maybe a little more vertical for the glass than like a Mach-E or something, so you might be able to stack a few more things, but the thing that shocked me about that cargo space is that the floor is pretty high. I feel like the Mach-E has a little bit of a lower floor, and I think even the ID4 might. And as far as the numbers go, the ID4 does have a little bit more rear space than this does. This supposedly is a little bit more space than a Mach-E, but again, based on my eyeballs, lengthwise, the Mach-E seemed identical. There's also more storage space under the floor in the Mach-E. In this, when you lift up the floor, you get tiny little slots on the left and the right, just enough to fit the charging cables, basically, and that's about it. So not a lot of space because there's the huge subwoofer that's taking up the middle of the underfloor area there. So not a ton of space there, and it's also a little bit disappointing because up front, unlike most other electric vehicles, there isn't really a frunk. There's a tiny little space there, but it's not even big enough to fit a backpack. You can maybe fit the charging cable again up front there, but it's basically useless. And that is an area where you have a huge disadvantage compared to the Mach-E and the Tesla. They have enormous frunks where you can fit full-size suitcases in there, or multiple full-size suitcases in the front trunks of those vehicles. And so this is a little bit more compact than a Mach-E. It's not as long, so if you want something that's maybe a little bit smaller, this might be a little bit nicer. But I think as far as overall cargo space goes, you know, since you have a pretty comparable back to the other competing vehicles, I mean, the ID4 doesn't have a frunk either, but, you know, the Tesla and the Mach-E, I think, definitely went out in the cargo capacity, you know, rankings in my mind, because they have those bigger frunks, and it's really nice to have that extra space. Overall, it's a very cool car. I've really enjoyed, you know, hanging out in this interior here for a week. I love, like I said, the fun touches, and overall I think they did a pretty good job. If they just fix the infotainment thing and finally make this wireless with a smartphone integration, I think that would, you know, really be a nice thing. I don't think they'll be able to fix the frunk until next generation, so that's kind of, it is what it is there. But, you know, I think overall they did a pretty good job.
Yeah, it's great, and it's super comfy. It's very futuristic in this inside of here, so if you love that kind of stuff, you'll love it in here.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all of our thoughts on the Ioniq 5. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Be sure to go watch the driving review if you want to hear what it's like to drive the Ioniq 5 here. But anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.
Take care.